Thank you, Ella. Good morning. Can you hear?
Yes.
There are hundreds of ways to be a feminist, obviously, but most of them are wrong. And so what I would say, and this will surprise nobody in the room, is that what women need to be free is feminism, the liberatory type, not the individual rights type, not the equality type, but actual liberation. And it might sound as though this is something that is merely utopian, an idea that can never be realised. But we tend not to say that about ending child poverty or other atrocities. We tend to work towards a solution. And so what I mean by the liberatory type of feminism, I suppose it's easy to tell you what I don't mean. So it's not the kind of Owen Jones, Billy Bragg, Laurie Penny, Judith Butler type. And it's not the fun feminism, pole dancing for exercise. And obviously, any woman who chooses to pole dance for exercise, fill your boots, great. Well, you won't be wearing any boots, will you? But there you go. But I think feminism is the only social movement on the planet that questions the right for us to have a definition. And so we can say Margaret Thatcher was a feminist. Billy Bragg is a feminist. And that tends to be just de rigueur amongst particularly maybe some younger generations of women and men, where we're not allowed to have at least a baseline definition. And I think we don't just have a right to define what feminism is, we have an imperative. We know that those trades union activists are not putting bosses and managers before workers, right? We know that, that's straightforward. And yet we're told when we say that what we need is feminism to achieve freedom is, well, what kind of feminism do you mean? Some feminists, for example, support the use of the most violent and degrading pornography. Well, if that's the case, I mean, they're clearly not feminists, but they have the right to say what they say and believe what they believe. And then, of course, you hear that, well, free speech is the route to freedom for everyone. Well, of course I'm a supporter of free speech. And yet feminists and feminism has been labelled as censorial, anti-free speech. And why is this? Well, it's because we say that pornography, for example, what happens on porn sets, is the actual abuse of women, and often men, but primarily women, and that it becomes a sex education for young men, for young women, which of course then makes the problem of the already massive problem we have with male violence towards women and girls globally. When feminists in the US dare to say that pornography is problematic, somebody is always there to scream First Amendment at them, always. And of course, most of the big cases in the US that tests the First Amendment are based on the rights of pornographers, such as Larry Flynt, who is now seen as a free speech hero. So it's extraordinary the way that feminists are told that we must toe this particular line, which is not allowing us autonomy within our own movement. Now, many of you here will say, well, why do you need a movement? Women should just fight for individual rights and freedom. Great, that's fine. But don't be surprised when the freedom that you as an individual, outside of any liberatory movement, is snatched away from you, or feels very precarious because you realise that actually you can't have a few drinks and take a risk of going home without thinking, I wonder if that man walking behind me might sexually assault me. I mean, we've all been there. Many of us have had it happen to us. But the one thing that unites women and girls globally is the actual fear, however transient it is, however low level, unconscious it is, of male violence, and of course the reality everywhere. But having said that, I'm not a cultural relativist. I do not believe that women in Pakistan or Saudi Arabia have the same freedoms as do I. It's nonsense. So it has to be women's freedom, and through women's liberation, can only be achieved in a secular democracy. Thank you.